Hello, you have found Seeds for Health, where I share information about nutrition, how our bodies work, and general health in servings that are easy to digest with understandable language that provides the facts you need to grow your best version of you. I'm your host, Greg Rocheford. Welcome to the show.
All right. As I alluded to in the first episode, there is something called the Triad of Health. I'm not sure if that's what it's actually called or if it even has a name, but that's what I'm going to call it, the Triad of Health. That triad consists of sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Any one of those that are neglected will affect the others. For instance, if you don't get enough sleep, your nutrition fails because now your body sees a low energy state because of your lack of sleep. And so it pumps a bunch of glucose into your bloodstream, and if it doesn't have a source of glucose, it starts screaming for it. So you start to crave sugar and carbohydrates. And there goes your nutrition. The exercise, again, the low energy state makes you less likely to want to do exercise. So you don't do exercise. So it kind of works in this weird synergistic way that if you ignore one, the other two suffer. If you ignore exercise, you might not be as tired as you would be on a night that you exercised. And if you have poor nutrition, that also affects your ability to exercise and to sleep properly. So, what is it about sleep? So, sleep is a regenerative thing. It's an amazing thing. So, part of sleep is to incorporate lessons or things that we've learned through the day. As we experience things throughout the day, those experiences are stored in a part of the brain called the hippocampus. Now, when we go to sleep, the important things from that short-term memory are put into long-term memory during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, when we're dreaming. Other things that occur during sleep is a flushing of waste products. There are cells within our brains called glial cells and astrocytes. None of that is important except that they form a flushing action with a fluid called glymphatic fluid, sort of like the lymphatic fluid in our bodies. This fluid is glymphatic because it originates from the glial cells. While we're awake, our brains are firing in various ways. You know, we see something fires in the back part of our brains, an optic nerve, optic cortex section. If we taste something, if we smell something, we want to say something, we hear something, we bump our toe, all these things are firing all over our brain, so our brain is really active. During sleep and during REM, our brains are really active. They look like we're awake, but we're not. There's one section, in fact, of our brains that is not firing, and that's the part that controls our motor functions. So that if we're running from some evil thing in our dream, we don't jump out of bed and start running. That would be pretty dangerous. So we are pretty much paralyzed during REM sleep while we have these dreams. The other part of sleep is deep sleep, and that's where that flushing from the glial cells of the glymphatic fluid occurs. So, like I said, during sleep or REM sleep and during wakefulness, our brains are firing all over. During deep sleep, our brains begin to pulse. Everything fires at once, which is really interesting. So this pulsing sets up this flow of the glymphatic fluid to rinse our brains and remove things like amyloid proteins and tau proteins, so that those don't build up and cause things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And that is also something I think that is exacerbated. That healthy benefit of the lymphatic flush is exacerbated by good exercise. So exercise comes back in again. There's another portion of sleep that's really interesting, and that is related to a buildup of a molecule called adenosine. Now, throughout the day, we clearly use a lot of energy to walk around, to think, to read, things like that. So our brains begin to build a surplus of a chemical called adenosine. Now, adenosine comes from a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate is the molecule that is used for energy. When adenosine triphosphate loses a phosphate, it becomes adenosine diphosphate, but also gives off energy. And that's how we fuel our muscles, fuel our brains, everything. So this is occurring trillions of times per second all over our bodies. It's crazy. So anyway, in our brains, this adenosine starts to build up. And that creates what's called sleep pressure. So as we go through our day, this adenosine builds up and that sleep pressure builds. So when we go to sleep, that adenosine is recycled and that level starts to drop. As the adenosine level drops and toward morning, it's nearly zero. So we wake up and we feel refreshed. Otherwise, if we didn't sleep well, we didn't reduce that adenosine and we don't feel as refreshed. So in the morning then, we wake up and many of us partake in coffee, tea, or yerba mate, and that brings into our bloodstreams caffeine. And our brain takes on that caffeine. Now the caffeine doesn't necessarily cause stimulus so much as it simply blocks the receptor that accepts the adenosine. So it kind of kicks the adenosine out of the way so that the adenosine is not making us tired. The caffeine has simply blocked that receptor so that adenosine can't dock. And that makes us feel more awake. But as you may have found out trying this during school or just driving or something, if you were to drink coffee because you feel tired, you might feel more awake, but that's only because you're blocking the adenosine from getting to those receptors. Now, once you stop drinking the coffee, and caffeine has a half-life of 6 to 8 hours, so at 8 hours, if you have 1 cup of coffee, it's sort of like having a half a cup of coffee. Anyway, once you stop drinking the coffee, suddenly the adenosine that's built up comes on with a vengeance. It starts just filling up like crazy. There's so much adenosine available, and it just fills it up, and you get really tired. You begin to crash. All right, so that's sleep. Sleep is incredible. I'd like to do an episode on sleep, but there are numerous places to find lots of information, which I'll put in the show notes. Nutrition. Nutrition is vitally important. It's kind of the anchor for all of this, although each one of these, sleep, nutrition, and exercise, are all kind of anchors. So there are 3 macronutrients that we eat. There's a 4th. Alcohol is kind of a macronutrient because it provides energy, but it provides no nutrition. So it's not really a nutrient. All right, so there are fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Now, our bodies can make a number of things. They can make amino acids, they can make fatty acids, and they can even make glucose. So let's talk about each one of those. With proteins, proteins are made of amino acids strung together. So when we eat proteins, there are things called essential amino acids that we get from that. We cannot make those amino acids, so we have to get it from our food. Those are essential. In fats, there are essential fatty acids, fatty acids that we cannot create ourselves, so we get it from our food. With carbohydrates, there are no essential carbohydrates. And what does that mean? That means that we don't need to eat carbohydrates. We do not. Carbohydrates are simply long chains of glucose strung together. Our glucose levels are around a teaspoon, and so that's about 5 grams of glucose in our bloodstreams. If we eat a sugary or a high carbohydrate meal, that glucose starts to spike. And in comes the pancreas to the rescue, I guess, and it creates a bunch of insulin. Insulin then takes that sugar and puts it into storage, takes that glucose and puts it into storage. There are a couple different places that it can do that. I might be going a little bit deep here, but it can put that glucose either into our muscles and liver as glycogen, another form of a carbohydrate, a chain of a bunch of little glucoses, or it can put it right into fat storage. So there's that. So the essential part of this is that there are essential proteins and essential fatty acids, but no essential carbohydrates. If we need to have more glucose because maybe that amount has gone a little bit below 5 grams, which is probably not much, otherwise we'd really be sick, we can actually create glucose ourselves from triglycerides, and I believe also from proteins. So we don't need it. And that's kind of the key, the secret to a lot of nutrition, is that if we can limit the number of carbohydrates we ingest or the amount of sugar that we ingest, we're going to be doing ourselves a great deal of good because we don't need those. Okay, so that's nutrition. We need protein, we need fat, but we don't need carbohydrates. Exercise. There's a couple of different kinds of exercise generally. There's aerobic exercise where you're moving along, you're doing something, biking, walking, running, and there's resistance exercise. Both of these are incredibly important. And I think I'll probably do some episodes possibly on both of these. So some of the benefits are cardiovascular benefits, improved sleep, weight management, glucose management because of using our muscles for walking, running, exercising. So those are the 3 in the triad. It's sleep, nutrition, and exercise. I wanted to say a little bit more about carbohydrates. So if we do eliminate carbohydrates because they're not necessary, they're not required, they're not essential, we will lose weight because insulin will not be produced or released by the pancreas to deal with the glucose that's in our bloodstream from either eating sugar or carbohydrates. And that is why a ketogenic diet is so effective at weight loss, because the triggering of insulin release does not occur. And our body goes into a state of ketosis, not ketoacidosis, which is a dangerous condition for type 1 diabetics. But for people who are not type 1 diabetics, we only go into healthy ketosis. So ketosis is brought about because our bodies are using fat as a fuel, not glucose, which helps us to burn the fat that we have on us and produce energy that we need. So that is why a ketogenic diet is so effective when you eat protein and fat and either eliminate or severely cut back on the amount of carbohydrates that you're eating. I think, just as a good rule of thumb, whether you eliminate carbohydrates or simply eliminate sugar, I think that is probably the most important thing. Eliminate sugar. Don't eat things with sugar. Look at the labels. You know that donuts have sugar, but look at the labels. Ketchup, mustard, pretty much everything. Bread, processed meats like hams that are, luncheon hams, and that's kind of junk. Look at the ingredients. There's sugar in all of that. Stop eating that. Don't eat that stuff. Don't eat processed food, and you'll be able to eliminate sugar from your diet, and you will feel much better.
Thank you for listening to Seeds for Health. I hope the information that I presented was informative. If so, please hit subscribe. Please also leave comments on how I can improve or topics that you'd like to see covered. Enjoy your journey to better health, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.